The ink on the divorce papers was still wet when Natasha Sinclair laughed. Not the kind of laugh that came from joy. This was sharper, colder, the sound of a woman who'd already won and wanted everyone in the room to know it. She slid a cashier's check across the polished mahogany table, the paper making a dry whisper against the wood. $8,000, Isaiah. That should cover first and last month's rent somewhere in Queens. Maybe the Bronx if you're lucky. Isaiah Mercer sat perfectly still. His hands rested on his thighs away from the table, because if he touched anything right now, the grease under his fingernails would leave marks on the expensive surface. The work jacket he wore had seen better days. Faded blue canvas with oil stains near the cuffs, the kind of stains that never came out no matter how many times you ran it through the wash. His work boots were clean, at least. He'd scrubbed them in the parking garage before coming up, standing over a storm drain with a wire brush for 10 minutes because showing up to your own divorce covered in motor oil felt like admitting something he wasn't ready to admit. Across from him, Natasha looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread. The Chanel suit was winter white, tailored so precisely it might as well have been painted on. Her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail that probably cost more to maintain than most people's car payments. The Cartier watch on her wrist caught the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows. 45th floor, panoramic view of Manhattan turning gray under June rain. She checked the time like she had somewhere more important to be. She probably did. Donovan Graves leaned against the windowsill, scrolling through his phone with the casual arrogance of a man who'd never been told no. 30 years old and already acting like he owned the city. The Brioni suit was midnight blue, the kind that cost 5 figures and came with a personal tailor who knew your inseam by heart. His watch was a Patek Philippe. Isaiah recognized it because he'd seen Natasha researching them online 3 months ago, back when she was still pretending the marriage meant something. 2003 F-150, right? Donovan didn't look up from his screen. My driver wouldn't be caught dead in that thing. You should upgrade. Get something from this decade. Isaiah said nothing. He'd learned over the past 6 months that silence made people uncomfortable, made them fill the space with more words than they intended, and right now every word out of Donovan's mouth was another nail in a coffin Isaiah had spent 3 years building. The lawyer, Gables, a sweating man in a gray suit that bunched at the shoulders, cleared his throat. Mr. Mercer, if you could just sign on the lines I've marked. Mrs. Sinclair has been very generous with the settlement terms, considering the prenuptial agreement. Generous. The word hung in the air like smoke. Isaiah kept his eyes on the papers, scanning the dense legal text he'd already memorized. Community property, none. Alimony, waived. Division of assets, she keeps the penthouse on the Upper East Side, the savings account with $43,000 she'd built from her fashion company, the furniture they'd picked out together when they still shared a bed. He gets his tools, his pickup truck, and $8,000 in what the document called goodwill settlement funds. Goodwill, like she was doing him a favor. You know what I love about this? Natasha leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. How easy you're making it. I expected tears, maybe some begging. But this is almost disappointing, Isaiah. Where's the fight? He met her eyes for the first time since sitting down. They were the same green he'd fallen in love with 4 years ago, standing in his auto shop in Brooklyn while she waited for her Mercedes to get towed. But there was something different now. Something harder, like looking at a stranger wearing a familiar face. There's nothing to fight for. The words came out quiet, flat, not angry, just true. She blinked. For half a second, something flickered across her face, surprise maybe, or the ghost of guilt, but it vanished before Isaiah could name it. Well then, she gestured at the papers. Sign. We both have places to be. In the back corner of the conference room, almost invisible in the shadows, a woman sat watching. She hadn't said a word since the meeting started. Catherine Ashford was 68 years old and looked like old money. the kind that didn't need to announce itself. Her suit was charcoal gray, perfectly tailored but understated. No visible labels. The only jewelry she wore was a simple wedding band. 24-karat gold worn thin from 40 years of marriage to a man who'd died 5 years ago. Her silver hair was cut in a neat bob. Her hands rested on the top of a walking cane, polished mahogany with a brass handle, more accessory than necessity. Gables had gone pale when she walked in, actually pale like someone had drained the blood from his face with a syringe. He'd started to say something, then stopped, then started again before finally just gesturing to a chair in the corner and going back to his papers with shaking hands. Isaiah caught his mother's eye. She gave the smallest nod. Wait. He looked back at the divorce decree, page after page of legalese that boiled down to one simple truth. Natasha Sinclair was erasing him from her life like a typo. 3 years of marriage gone. He should have felt something, rage, heartbreak, the crushing weight of failure. Instead, there was just this cold clarity, like standing outside in winter and realizing you couldn't feel your fingers anymore. The thing was, he'd seen this coming. Not the divorce specifically, though that had been brewing for months, but the moment when Natasha would look at him and decide he wasn't enough. That moment had been inevitable from the start, written into the foundation of everything they'd built together. He just hadn't wanted to believe it. 4 years ago, Isaiah Mercer had been nobody. At least that's what everyone assumed when they looked at him. 32 years old, running a small auto repair shop in Red Hook that specialized in foreign imports. Grease under his fingernails, oil stains on his jeans, the kind of guy you'd walk past on the street without a second glance. He was good at what he did, better than good. He could diagnose an engine problem by sound, could rebuild a transmission blindfolded, knew the electrical system of a BMW like some people knew the Bible. But he wasn't supposed to be more than that. Natasha's Mercedes had broken down 3 blocks from his shop on a Tuesday afternoon in September. Fuel pump failure. Simple fix. She'd been furious, standing there in a business suit and heels that weren't designed for Brooklyn sidewalks. Talking on her phone about a meeting she was missing while the tow truck driver hooked up her car. Isaiah had given her coffee. Not the good kind, just whatever was left in the pot from that morning, bitter and burned. She'd taken it anyway, wrapping both hands around the paper cup like she was trying to warm herself, even though it was 70 degrees outside. How long? He'd looked up from the work order. Fuel pump's an easy job. 2 hours, maybe 3. I can have it ready by 6. She'd checked her watch, the same Cartier she was wearing now, though it was gold back then instead of rose gold, and sighed. I have a presentation at 4. This is a disaster. Where do you need to be? Midtown, but without a car. I'll drive you. The offer had come out before he'd thought about it. She'd stared at him like he'd just offered to carry her across a river. In what? He'd pointed at the F-150 parked outside, the same truck Donovan had just mocked. It was old even then, paint faded, a dent in the passenger door from where he'd backed into a pole 5 years prior. But the engine was solid, rebuilt with his own hands, and it ran like a dream. I know it's not much, but it beats a taxi in traffic. She'd hesitated. He could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. Trusting a stranger, getting into a beat-up truck, showing up to a fashion industry meeting smelling like motor oil. But desperation was a powerful thing. Okay. Yes, thank you. The drive had been quiet at first. Radio off, windows cracked, the sound of traffic grinding through the city like gears that needed oil. Isaiah kept his eyes on the road. Natasha kept checking her phone, typing rapid-fire texts with her thumbs occasionally glancing at him when she thought he wasn't looking. Finally, "You always this helpful to strangers, only the ones who look like they're about to murder their phone." She'd laughed. Actual laughter, not the cold version she'd perfected over the past year. That obvious? Little bit. "I'm launching a new line, spring collection. The investors want to see prototypes, but the samples got delayed in shipping, and my presentation is basically me begging them to trust my vision with nothing to show for it. She'd leaned her head back against the seat. I'm going to bomb. You won't bomb. You don't know that. I know you got in a truck with a stranger because you were determined not to miss this meeting. That's not the kind of person who bombs presentations. She'd looked at him then, really looked, not at his clothes or his hands or the truck, but at him. What's your name? Isaiah. Isaiah Mercer. Natasha Sinclair. He dropped her off in front of a glass tower in Midtown, the kind of building where the doorman wore uniforms that cost more than his monthly rent. She'd thanked him, asked for his shop's address, promised to pick up her car before closing. He'd assumed that would be the end of it. She came back at 7:30. The car was ready, purring like new. He'd replaced the fuel pump and thrown in an oil change for free because the dipstick had shown she was running a quart low, and that was the kind of thing that kept him up at night. How'd it go? She'd grinned, not smiled, grinned wild and bright. I got the funding, $2 million. They loved it. That's incredible. It's because of you. She'd grabbed his hand, impulsive, not caring about the grease. If you hadn't driven me, I would have missed it entirely. You saved my entire company. I just gave you a ride. You did more than that. She'd hesitated, still holding his hand. Let me buy you dinner, as a thank you. He should have said no, should have seen the difference between their worlds and recognized the gap for what it was, unbridgeable. But her hand was warm in his, and she was looking at him like he'd done something heroic instead of just being decent, and he'd been lonely for a long time without realizing it. Okay. Dinner turned into drinks. Drinks turned into a walk through Prospect Park, talking until 2 in the morning about everything and nothing. She told him about growing up in Columbus, Ohio, in a neighborhood where the houses had bars on the windows and the corner store got robbed twice a month, about working 3 jobs to put herself through community college, then design school, then the brutal years of unpaid internships and sleeping on friends' couches while she built her portfolio. He told her about his father, about working at IBM for 30 years, starting in the mailroom and ending as a senior engineer, about how Henry Mercer had wanted Isaiah to follow him into tech, get a degree, work in an air-conditioned office where your hands stayed clean, about the fight they'd had when Isaiah dropped out of college to become a mechanic. He thought I was wasting my potential. Were you? Isaiah had shrugged. I'm happy. That counts for something. She'd looked at him like that was the strangest thing she'd ever heard. You're happy fixing other people's cars? I'm happy building things. Doesn't matter if it's an engine or a program or a life, long as I'm making something that works. 3 months later, they were living together. 6 months after that, he proposed. It wasn't romantic. No fancy restaurant, no ring hidden in champagne. Just the 2 of them in his tiny apartment above the shop, eating Chinese takeout straight from the containers. And Isaiah realizing he didn't want to imagine his life without her in it. Marry me. She'd frozen, lo mein halfway to her mouth. What? I know it's fast, I know we're different, but I don't care about that. I care about you. I love you. Marry me. She'd put down the container. For a long moment she just stared at him, and Isaiah felt his heart trying to climb out through his throat. Then she'd started crying. Not sad tears, happy ones, and nodded so hard her ponytail came loose. Yes, God, yes. They got married at City Hall on a Tuesday afternoon. No guests, no reception, just a judge and 2 witnesses pulled from the hallway. Natasha wore a white sundress she'd designed herself. Isaiah wore the only suit he owned, bought from a thrift store in college and altered to fit. They signed the license, kissed in front of a bored clerk, and went to a diner to celebrate with pancakes and terrible coffee. It was perfect for about 6 months. The cracks started small. Natasha's company grew faster than anyone expected. The spring line sold out in 3 weeks. Investors came calling, wanting to pump money into expansion, new locations, international distribution. Suddenly, she was flying to Milan and Paris and London, gone for weeks at a time, coming home exhausted and distant. Isaiah kept the shop running, fixed cars, paid bills, tried not to notice how she flinched when he touched her with oil-stained hands. Tried not to hear the way she lowered her voice when her fashion industry friends called and asked what her husband did for a living. Year 2, things got worse. Natasha started talking about moving to Manhattan. The Brooklyn apartment was too small, too far from the action, too embarrassing when her colleagues wanted to visit. Isaiah sold his shop, not because he wanted to, but because she asked him to, and he was still trying to make things work. Took the money and rented a workspace in Queens, went freelance, told himself it was temporary. It wasn't. She started traveling with an assistant, then an assistant and a publicist, then an assistant, a publicist, and Donovan Graves, who ran a venture capital fund that specialized in fashion startups. Donovan was everything Isaiah wasn't. Ivy League educated, old money, the kind of connections that opened doors before you even knocked. He talked about cap tables and runway and exit strategies like other people talked about the weather. Natasha started quoting him at dinner, started laughing at his jokes even when they weren't funny, started working late at the office, then later, then not coming home at all some nights. Isaiah knew. Of course he knew. You didn't live with someone for 2 years and miss the signs. The way she angled her phone away when texting, the new perfume that smelled expensive and foreign, the silk underwear that showed up in the laundry, tag still on, nothing he'd seen her wear. He confronted her on a Sunday morning in March. She'd just gotten home from a business trip to Miami, still wearing yesterday's makeup, her suitcase unpacked in the hallway. "Are you sleeping with him?" She'd frozen, her hand on the refrigerator door. For a second he thought she might lie. Then her shoulders slumped and she closed the door without taking anything out. "Yes." The word hit like a fist. Not because it was a surprise, but because hearing it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "How long? Does it matter? How long, Natasha?" She turned to face him. No tears, no apologies, just this flat, tired look that said she'd already checked out of the marriage and was just waiting for him to catch up. 4 months. 4 months. While she was kissing him goodbye at the airport, while she was asking him to fix things around the apartment, while she was still signing Christmas cards from the Mercers. "I want a divorce." She'd nodded like she'd been expecting it. "Okay, that's it? Just okay?" "What do you want me to say, Isaiah?" Her voice cracked. First real emotion he'd seen that morning. "That I'm sorry? I am. I'm sorry I married you thinking I could make it work. I'm sorry I let it go on this long when we both knew it was over. I didn't know it was over. That's because you're content with mediocrity." The words came out sharp, cutting. "You're happy fixing cars and living small and never wanting more. And that's fine for you. But I can't do it anymore. I can't be the wife of a mechanic who smells like motor oil and doesn't understand why I need more than this." There it was, the truth she'd been dancing around for 2 years. He wasn't enough, would never be enough, because she was measuring him by money and status and all the things he'd deliberately chosen not to chase. "So that's it. You're leaving me for Donovan. I'm leaving you for me. Donovan just happens to be there." 3 months later, here they were. Conference room on the 45th floor, signing papers that would erase their marriage like it had never happened. Isaiah should have fought harder, should have told her the truth about who he really was, what he'd really been doing all those late nights in the garage. But pride was a stubborn thing, and he was tired of being seen as less than. Let her think she won. Let her walk away with her $8,000 consolation prize and her venture capitalist boyfriend and her fashion empire built on credit cards and borrowed time. He picked up the pen, cheap plastic ballpoint, the kind that came free with office supply orders, and flipped to the signature pages. Wait, Donovan pushed off from the windowsill. Before you sign, there's something you should know. Isaiah looked up. Natasha shot Donovan a warning glance that he ignored. Natasha and I are getting engaged. Officially. We're announcing it at the Metropolitan Club next month. Donovan's smile was sharp as broken glass. Just figured you should hear it from us instead of reading it in the society pages. Professional courtesy and all that. Professional courtesy from the man who'd been sleeping with his wife for 4 months while pretending to be a business partner. Isaiah felt his mother shift in the corner, heard the quiet tap of her cane against the floor. A warning. Don't react. Stay calm. He looked at Natasha. She had the decency to look uncomfortable at least. Congratulations. Donovan's smile faltered. That's it? No scene? No begging her to reconsider? Would it change anything? The question hung in the air. Natasha looked away, finding something fascinating in the rain-streaked windows. No, Donovan said finally. It wouldn't. Then there's nothing to say. Isaiah turned back to the papers. His hand was steady as he signed his name on the first line. Isaiah Mercer, not Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford, which was his legal name, the one on his birth certificate and driver's license and the corporate filings for Carter Technologies. Just Isaiah Mercer, the mechanic, the nobody, the man who wasn't worth fighting for. He signed the second page, third, fourth. Each signature felt like letting go of something he'd been holding too tight for too long. Not the marriage. That had been dead for months, but the hope that maybe if he waited long enough, stayed quiet enough, loved her hard enough, she'd wake up one day and see him for who he really was. She wouldn't. She'd proven that. Final page. He signed his name one last time and pushed the papers back across the table. Done. Gables grabbed them like they might catch fire, flipping through to verify every signature was in place. This is yes. Everything appears to be in order. I'll file these with the court tomorrow. You should receive your final decree within 30 days. 30 days until it was official. 30 days until Natasha Sinclair was no longer his wife, no longer his problem, no longer anything to him except a name he'd have to learn not to think about in the middle of the night. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. I hope you find someone who makes you happy, Isaiah. Someone who fits your lifestyle. I hope Donovan gives you everything you think you need. It wasn't quite a blessing, wasn't quite a curse, something in between, like most truths. Donovan grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. Come on, babe. I made reservations at Per Se. 1 o'clock. Actually, the voice came from the corner, quiet but carrying. Before you leave, there's something we need to discuss. Catherine Ashford stood up, leaning on her cane with one hand. She was shorter than Isaiah remembered, barely 5'4" in heels, but she had a presence that made the room feel smaller just by standing. Gables actually took a step back, bumping into his chair. Natasha frowned. I'm sorry, who are you? An observer. Catherine walked slowly to the table, her cane tapping against the floor with each step. Tap, step, tap, step. I was told there was a legal proceeding happening in my building. I like to keep informed about who uses my conference rooms. Your building? Donovan's laugh was nervous, forced. This is Ashford Tower. Unless you're... He stopped. Actually stopped mid-sentence as the pieces fell into place. The silver hair, the cane, the way Gables had gone white as printer paper when she walked in. Catherine Ashford. She didn't offer her hand. I own this building, among other things. Natasha found her voice first. Mrs. Ashford, I had no idea. We would never have presumed. It's fine. The conference room is available for rent, though I do wonder about the company Mr. Gables keeps these days. She looked at the lawyer with something that might have been disappointment. We've known each other 15 years, Harold. You could have sent a courtesy call. I didn't think... Mrs. Ashford, I apologize. Don't apologize, just introduce me to your clients. Gables looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. This is Natasha Sinclair and Donovan Graves. There was a divorce proceeding. I gathered that much. Catherine's eyes moved to Isaiah. They were ice blue, sharp as January wind, and for half a second something passed between them that looked almost like amusement. And the gentleman in the work jacket? Isaiah stood up, his boots scuffing against the polished floor, leaving faint marks he knew the cleaning crew would buff out by morning. Isaiah Mercer, ma'am. Mercer. She said it slowly, tasting the name. That's interesting. I used to know a Mercer. Good man. Worked for my late husband back in the 80s. Started in the mailroom. Ended up running our entire IT division. That was my father. The room went very quiet. Even the rain outside seemed to pause, waiting. Henry Mercer. Catherine smiled, and it was warm, genuine, nothing like the corporate mask most billionaires wore. I went to his funeral 5 years ago. Lovely service. You gave the eulogy. You remember that? I remember my husband cried. First time I'd seen him cry since our daughter died. Your father was a good friend to him. Natasha was staring at Isaiah like she'd never seen him before. Donovan had gone pale, hand frozen halfway to his phone. I didn't know. Natasha's voice came out small. You never said your father worked for... You never asked. The words landed like stones in still water. She flinched. Catherine tapped her cane against the floor. Mr. Graves, I understand you have a meeting scheduled with Ashford Holdings next Monday. Is that correct? Donovan straightened, trying to recover his composure. Yes, ma'am. We're very excited about the opportunity to... Canceled. I'm sorry? The meeting. It's canceled. My acquisitions team did their due diligence on your fund. The numbers don't work. Too much leverage, not enough actual assets. We're not interested. Donovan's face went from pale to red. That's not... We have investors. You have debt, $30 million worth, according to our research. Some of it ours, actually. We bought your notes from a distressed asset fund last month. Catherine tilted her head. Small world. We'll be calling those notes in Monday morning. Have your lawyer ready. The silence that followed was the kind that made your ears ring. Donovan opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish drowning in air. Natasha grabbed his arm. Donovan, what is she talking about? What debt? He shook her off. This is insane. You can't just... There are contracts. There are clauses. Read the fine print, Mr. Graves. We have the right to call in any loan if we determine the borrower poses an unacceptable risk. Catherine's smile was cold as winter steel. You pose an unacceptable risk. This is because of him, isn't it? Donovan pointed at Isaiah. Because his daddy worked for your husband. This is nepotism. This is business. Catherine's voice dropped 10 degrees. And if you're going to throw around accusations, you should make sure you're not standing in a room that records everything for liability purposes. Donovan's eyes went to the ceiling, searching for cameras. Found them. 2 small domes in opposite corners, red lights blinking. I think we're done here. Catherine turned to Isaiah. Walk an old woman to her car? It wasn't really a question. Isaiah grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair, ignoring Natasha's stare, ignoring Donovan's barely contained rage. He followed his mother to the door. Behind them, Natasha found her voice. Isaiah, wait! He stopped. Didn't turn around. That 8,000, you should take it. You'll need it. He left it on the table, walked out without looking back. The elevator ride down was silent except for the mechanical hum of cables and pulleys. Catherine watched the floor numbers tick down, 45, 44, 43, while Isaiah stood with his hands in his pockets trying to process what had just happened. The fluorescent lights made everything feel overexposed, clinical, like a hospital corridor instead of a luxury office building. You didn't have to do that. Do what? Cancel Donovan's meeting. Call in his loans. You just cost him his entire business. I cost him nothing. Catherine's reflection in the polished doors was calm, measured. He cost himself by leveraging other people's money to fund a lifestyle he couldn't afford. Besides, you think I'd let that smug little trust fund baby walk away thinking he won after what he did to my son? I'm fine. You're heartbroken. There's a difference. The elevator opened into the parking garage. A black Escalade was waiting, engine running, driver standing at attention. Catherine's daily car, armored and anonymous, the kind that blended into Manhattan traffic like water. She paused before getting in, one hand on the doorframe, looking at him with those ice-blue eyes that missed nothing. Are you sure about this? Once we start, there's no going back. Isaiah thought about Natasha's face when Catherine introduced herself, the way Donovan's confidence had crumbled like wet paper, the $8,000 still sitting on the conference room table unclaimed. I wanted her to love me for who I was, not what I had. And she didn't. Then she doesn't deserve to know the truth. Catherine patted his arm, the gesture brief but warm. 3 weeks until their engagement party. That gives us time to prepare. Prepare what? Justice, baby. The kind that comes with receipts. She got into the car. The door closed with a heavy thunk. Bulletproof glass and reinforced steel between her and the world. Isaiah watched the Escalade pull out of the garage, merge into traffic, disappear into the gray maze of the city. Behind him, footsteps echoed across concrete. He didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Isaiah. Natasha's heels clicked against the floor. She'd followed him down, leaving Donovan upstairs with Gables and the divorce papers in his crumbling empire. Her makeup was starting to run from tears she was trying not to cry. He turned. She looked smaller somehow, standing there in her designer suit with mascara beginning to smudge, like a woman realizing too late that she'd miscalculated everything. Why didn't you tell me? Tell you what? That your father was... that you knew. She gestured helplessly at the building around them. Any of it? Why did you let me think you were just a mechanic? I am just a mechanic. Don't do that. Don't lie. I'm not lying. Isaiah kept his voice level, calm. My father worked for Ashford Holdings. That doesn't make me special. That just makes me the son of a man who was good at his job. But Catherine Ashford knows you. She came to your father's funeral. She just destroyed Donovan's entire fund because of you. She destroyed his fund because he's a fraud. That has nothing to do with me. Natasha wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking cold despite the heated garage. I made a mistake. Yes, you did. Not the divorce. She took a shaky breath. Treating you like you weren't enough, making you feel small. You were never small, Isaiah. I just couldn't see past my own insecurities. For a second, he wanted to tell her about Carter Technologies, about the software he'd built in her garage while she slept, the patents filed under shell companies, the IPO that had made him richer than she'd ever be, about the man she'd thrown away for Donovan Graves, who was worth nothing compared to what she could have had. But telling her wouldn't change anything. It would just be petty, and he was tired of being petty. I hope Donovan makes you happy. He won't. She said it flat, matter of fact. I know that now. He's broke, probably worse than broke, and now that Catherine Ashford is calling in his debts, her laugh was bitter. I'm going to end up exactly where I started, alone and scrambling. You'll survive. You always do. Will I? Isaiah looked at her, really looked, saw the fear underneath the designer clothes, the desperation that had driven her to trade a marriage for a venture capitalist's promises. She'd been running from poverty so long she'd forgotten how to stand still. Yeah, you will. He walked past her, heading for the exit where his F-150 was parked in visitor parking. She didn't follow, just stood there under the fluorescent lights with her arms wrapped tight, watching him leave for the second time that day. Outside, the rain had stopped. The city smelled like wet asphalt and exhaust fumes, the particular perfume of June in Manhattan. Isaiah climbed into his truck. Familiar cracked leather, familiar engine rattle, familiar everything, and sat for a minute with his hands on the wheel. His phone buzzed. Text from his mother. "Dinner tonight. We should discuss Metropolitan Club arrangements." He typed back, 7. Perfect. Wear something nice. We're celebrating. Celebrating like they'd won something. Maybe they had. Maybe this was what winning looked like when you played the long game. Watching your ex-wife realize too late what she'd thrown away, watching her new boyfriend's empire crumble, walking out with your dignity intact and your secrets still buried. Or maybe it was just the start. Isaiah started the engine. It caught on the first try, purring smooth. All that rebuilt work paying off. He pulled out of the parking garage into Manhattan traffic. Just another pickup truck in a city full of them. Invisible and unremarkable. Exactly how he liked it. For now. 3 weeks later, Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford was elbow-deep in a 1967 Shelby Cobra when his phone rang. He ignored it. The carburetor on this particular beast had been giving him trouble for 2 days, flooding the engine, choking on its own fuel mixture, behaving like a temperamental thoroughbred that needed patient hands and careful calibration. The owner was paying $15,000 for the restoration, worth every penny if Isaiah could get it right. The phone stopped ringing, started again 30 seconds later. He wiped his hands on a shop rag and checked the screen. Unknown number, probably spam. He swiped to decline and went back to adjusting the idle mixture screw, listening to the engine's rhythm like a doctor checking a heartbeat. Precision Auto Restoration sat in a converted warehouse in Long Island City. High ceilings, exposed brick, floor-to-ceiling windows that let in winter light the color of steel. Not the kind of shop that fixed oil changes and brake pads. This was where Manhattan's elite brought their vintage Ferraris and Porsches and Aston Martins to be resurrected from rust and neglect. The waiting list was 8 months long. The hourly rate made lawyers jealous. Isaiah employed 6 mechanics, all of them older than him, all of them convinced they worked for some mysterious owner who only showed up for quarterly inspections. The business card said Precision Auto Restoration, a division of Carter Holdings. Nobody bothered asking what Carter Holdings was. The paychecks cleared. The work was challenging. That was enough. What they didn't know, Isaiah Mercer was Carter Holdings. Had been since he incorporated 4 years ago, 2 years before he met Natasha, back when he was still running the Brooklyn shop and coding software in a studio apartment that smelled like burnt coffee and possibility. The Cobra's engine caught clean, beautiful. He revved it once, twice, listening to the purr that meant everything was finally aligned. The owner would pick it up tomorrow and probably frame the invoice because men who bought 60-year-old muscle cars weren't interested in practicality. His phone rang again. Same unknown number. This time he answered. "Carter. Mr. Ashford, this is Patricia from Covington and Burke. Mr. Westfield would like to review the Q4 projections for Carter Technologies before the board meeting Thursday. Can you come in this afternoon?" Isaiah glanced at the clock mounted above the tool rack. 2:30. He had 3 more hours of shop time scheduled, plus the Jaguar E-Type waiting for a transmission rebuild. 4 o'clock work? Perfect. Conference room B. He'll have the prospectus ready. She hung up without saying goodbye. Lawyers were efficient like that. Isaiah stripped off his coveralls and headed for the bathroom in the back. The mirror showed a man who looked nothing like a CEO. Grease smudge on his left cheekbone, hair sticking up where his safety goggles had pressed it flat. Hands stained dark despite the industrial soap he scrubbed with twice daily. He looked exactly like what Natasha had thought he was, what everyone thought he was. Nobody looked at a mechanic and saw a software entrepreneur. That was the entire point. Carter Technologies had started as a problem that needed solving. 4 years ago, working 16-hour days at the Brooklyn shop, he'd gotten frustrated with the inventory management systems. Every auto parts supplier had their own database, their own ordering process, their own incompatible software. Tracking what you had, what you needed, what was back-ordered or discontinued required spreadsheets and phone calls and prayer. So he'd built something better. Started simple. A database that pulled from multiple suppliers, cross-referenced part numbers, flagged discontinued items with compatible alternatives. Taught himself Python, then SQL, then whatever else he needed to make it work. Coded at night after the shop closed, testing during the day when orders came in wrong or late. 6 months in, he had a working prototype. Another mechanic saw it, asked if Isaiah could build one for his shop, then another, then 10, then 50. By the time he met Natasha, Carter Technologies had 200 auto shops using the software on a subscription model. Revenue was enough to quit the mechanic work if he wanted. He didn't want. Liked working with his hands too much. Liked the honesty of metal and grease and things that either worked or didn't. He kept both lives separate. Carter Technologies existed on paper. LLC registered in Delaware. Corporate address at a law firm in Midtown. Bank accounts and tax returns and quarterly filings with the state. Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford was listed as founder and CEO. But nobody outside the lawyers and accountants knew that Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford and Isaiah Mercer the mechanic were the same person. When he married Natasha, he'd meant to tell her, kept waiting for the right moment. But she'd been so focused on her fashion empire, so dismissive of his mechanic work, that telling her felt like admitting he needed to be more than what he was. And he didn't. He was fine being both, grease under his fingernails and code in his head, building engines and algorithms with the same patient precision. Then her company took off and she started traveling, and Donovan entered the picture, and Isaiah realized he was running an experiment he hadn't meant to design. Would she love him if he stayed nobody? The answer was no. He showered in the shop's cramped bathroom, changed into clothes he kept in a locker. Dark jeans, button-down shirt, leather jacket that had cost more than most people's monthly rent but looked unremarkable if you didn't know Italian tailoring. Walked out through the shop floor where Tommy, the senior mechanic, was bleeding the brakes on a vintage Porsche 911. Heading out early, Isaiah grabbed his keys from the hook by the door. Got an appointment in the city. You good with the Jag transmission? Tommy wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Long as the boss approves the parts order, yeah. Those synchros aren't cheap. I'll make sure he approves it. You ever actually met the owner? Tommy asked. Like in person? Once or twice. Quiet guy, keeps to himself. Lucky bastard owning a place like this. Probably never turned a wrench in his life. Probably. The drive into Manhattan took 40 minutes in midday traffic. Isaiah parked in a garage 3 blocks from Covington and Burke's offices, paid the extortion-level hourly rate, and walked the rest of the way under a sky threatening snow. The law firm occupied floors 30 through 35 of a glass tower in Midtown. Isaiah checked in with security, got a visitor badge that clipped to his jacket, rode the elevator up with 2 men in suits who were having an animated conversation about discovery motions and depositions. They didn't look at him. People in expensive buildings never looked at people who didn't belong. Patricia met him in the lobby on 32. She was 50, silver hair pulled into a bun, reading glasses on a chain around her neck. She'd been his father's assistant at IBM 20 years ago, had cried at the funeral and agreed to help Isaiah navigate corporate law when Carter Technologies got too big to run from a kitchen table. You're early. Traffic was light. John's waiting. Fair warning. He wants to talk about the IPO timeline again. John Westfield was Carter Technologies' corporate counsel. Yale Law, 15 years at Goldman Sachs before going into private practice. The kind of lawyer who billed in 6-minute increments and was worth every penny. He was also Henry Mercer's college roommate, which meant he had a vested interest in making sure Isaiah didn't accidentally tank a multi-million-dollar company through ignorance. Conference Room B was all glass walls and leather chairs and a view of the Chrysler Building turning gold in afternoon light. Westfield sat at the head of the table with a stack of documents that could have killed a small animal. Isaiah. Good. Sit. Isaiah sat. Westfield slid a bound prospectus across the table. Q4 revenue projections came in. We're up 18% over Q3. Subscription renewals are at 94% retention. New client acquisition is exceeding targets by 30%. That's good. That's exceptional. Westfield leaned back, tapping his pen against the table, which is why the board thinks now is the time to revisit going public. They'd had this conversation before, multiple times. Carter Technologies was profitable, growing, stable, exactly the kind of company that could launch a successful IPO and make everyone involved obscenely wealthy. But going public meant scrutiny, meant quarterly earnings calls and shareholder expectations and Isaiah's name all over financial news as the boy genius who'd built a tech company in his spare time while fixing cars. I'm still not interested. You're leaving money on the table. I have enough money. Westfield studied him the way lawyers study witnesses they're about to cross-examine. This isn't about the divorce, is it? Because if you're avoiding publicity to spare your ex-wife's feelings. Natasha doesn't factor into my business decisions. Good, because her fashion company is circling the drain. Word on the street is she's underwater $8 million and sinking fast. Her investors are getting nervous. Isaiah hadn't asked, didn't need to, but the information settled in his chest like a stone anyway. How'd you hear that? I hear everything, it's why you pay me. Westfield flipped through the prospectus, found a page marked with a yellow tab. Here's what I'm proposing. We do a limited IPO, offer 30% of shares publicly, retain 70% between you and your mother. That gives you capital for expansion, keeps control firmly in family hands, and gets the board off my back about growth opportunities. When? Spring, April or May. Market conditions are favorable. We'd need to file with the SEC by February, which gives you 6 weeks to decide if you want to stay invisible forever or actually get credit for what you've built. Credit. The word tasted like ashes. Isaiah had spent 3 years hiding Carter Technologies from Natasha. Because he wanted to know if she'd love him without it. She hadn't. Now she was engaged to Donovan Graves, planning some society wedding at the Metropolitan Club, and Isaiah was sitting in a lawyer's office debating whether to announce to the world that the grease monkey she'd divorced was actually worth $50 million. The irony was sharp enough to draw blood. I'll think about it. Think fast. These windows close. Westfield stood, gathering his papers. Oh, and your mother called. Something about needing you to RSVP to a party. I'll handle it. Back in the elevator, descending through floors of people who measured success in corner offices and expense accounts. Isaiah pulled out his phone. 7 missed calls. 3 from unknown numbers, 4 from his mother. He called her back. She answered on the first ring. Finally, I was about to send a search party. I was in a meeting. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I need you to confirm you're attending the Metropolitan Club event. The director called asking if you were bringing a guest. The engagement party. Natasha and Donovan's grand announcement scheduled for 3 weeks from Saturday. Isaiah had almost forgotten about it, buried as he'd been in carburetors and quarterly projections. I don't need a guest. You need someone respectable. Someone who won't make Donovan feel threatened but will make Natasha regret every decision that led her to that moment. Catherine's voice carried that particular satisfaction of a woman who'd orchestrated something 6 moves ahead of everyone else. Renata Kovac. Remember her? Designed the lobby renovation for Ashford Tower. Brilliant woman, elegant, completely uninterested in you romantically, so there won't be any awkward expectations. Isaiah remembered Renata. Late 40s, sharp cheekbones, dark hair with a silver streak she wore like a statement. She'd pitched the lobby redesign with a scale model built from reclaimed materials and a 20-minute presentation that had the board eating from her hand. She'd do it? I already asked. She said yes. Catherine's voice carried satisfaction. I told her to wear something stunning but understated. We want Natasha to notice her, not overshadow your entrance. This feels manipulative. Baby, it is manipulative. That's the point. You're not going to that party to celebrate their engagement. You're going to show her exactly what she threw away. Isaiah leaned against the elevator wall, watching floor numbers tick down. 32, 31, 30. What if I just don't go? Then Donovan wins. He gets to marry your ex-wife, spend her money until it runs out, and never face consequences for treating you like you were beneath him. Catherine's tone shifted, softer. You don't have to destroy them, Isaiah, but you should at least let them see who you really are. Give them one night of truth before they build their marriage on lies. The elevator opened onto the lobby. Isaiah stepped out into the marble and glass canyon, surrounded by people rushing to meetings and deals and lives that didn't include grease stains or code commits or the quiet satisfaction of fixing things. Okay, I'll go. Excellent. Wear the charcoal suit, not the navy. And for God's sake, get a haircut before then. You look like a mechanic. I am a mechanic. You're a CEO who happens to fix cars. There's a difference. She hung up before he could argue. Isaiah walked back to the parking garage through streets going dark with early winter. His phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Isaiah, this is Natasha. I need to talk to you. Please call me. He deleted it, kept walking. Across town in a penthouse apartment she couldn't afford and a life built on credit she couldn't sustain. Natasha Sinclair stared at her phone, willing it to ring. It didn't. She tried again, typing fast before she lost her nerve. It's important. About Donovan, please. The message showed as delivered, then read, then nothing. Donovan emerged from the bedroom in a bathrobe that cost $1,200, hair wet from the shower, already on his phone, scrolling through emails that made his jaw tighten. Who are you texting? No one. Work thing. She locked her screen, set the phone face down on the marble kitchen counter that had come with the apartment. Rental furniture in a rental life. Everything temporary, everything borrowed. How was your meeting? Cancelled. He poured scotch into a crystal tumbler, neat, drank half of it in one swallow. Catherine Ashford's office called, said they're pursuing other opportunities. Natasha's stomach dropped. The Ashford deal had been Donovan's safety net, the $50 million that would have covered his debts and funded the expansion and proven to his investors that he was worth backing. Without it, they were exposed. What about the other funds? The ones in Boston? Also pulling out. Apparently, word travels fast when Catherine Ashford decides you're not worth her time. He finished the scotch, poured more. We're fucked, Natasha. Completely. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. I've got 20 million in margin calls coming due next month. My investors are asking questions I can't answer. And now the one woman who could have saved me has decided I'm toxic. He laughed, bitter. All because I'm marrying your mechanic's ex-wife. Isaiah has nothing to do with this, doesn't he? Catherine Ashford shows up at your divorce, destroys my business in 5 minutes, and you think that's coincidence? Wake up, Natasha. Your ex-husband has connections you never bothered learning about. The words hit like a slap because he was right. She'd spent 3 years married to Isaiah and never once asked about his family beyond the basics. Never wondered why he had refined taste in wine despite the grease-stained work clothes. Never questioned how a mechanic could afford the diamond engagement ring he'd proposed with, modest though it was. She'd been so busy looking forward, climbing higher, chasing the version of success that looked good on Instagram that she'd never looked sideways at the man sleeping next to her. I tried calling him. Donovan set down his glass with a click that sounded too loud. Then make him answer. Go to his shop. Grovel if you have to. Find out what his connection to Catherine Ashford is and whether he can undo whatever the hell he did to my business. I can't just... You can. You will. He grabbed his phone, headed back to the bedroom. I have calls to make. Damage control. And Natasha, figure out your own damage control too. Your company's bleeding money and I'm in no position to bail you out anymore. The bedroom door closed, locked. Natasha stood alone in the kitchen, surrounded by rental furniture and marble counters, watching the city lights blink on through floor-to-ceiling windows she couldn't afford. Her phone sat dark on the counter. No missed calls, no messages, just the silence of a man who'd said everything he needed to say 3 weeks ago in a conference room on the 45th floor. She opened her banking app, checked the balances she'd been avoiding for weeks. Business account, $43,000. Personal account, $8,200. Credit cards maxed, all of them. The engagement party was costing $300,000. Half already paid, non-refundable. Half due 2 weeks before the event, money she didn't have. Money Donovan had promised to cover because his fund was thriving and her company would be profitable any quarter now, and together they were building an empire. Except his fund was dying and her company was already dead, just waiting for someone to call time of death and file the paperwork. She picked up her phone, scrolled to Isaiah's contact, deleted, started typing a new message to his old email address, the one from when they were married, stopped. What would she even say? Sorry I treated you like you were nothing? Sorry I chose Donovan's promises over your quiet steadiness? Sorry I'm desperate enough now to beg the man I divorced for help because my brilliant plan is falling apart? She deleted the draft, set the phone down. Through the windows, Manhattan glittered like scattered diamonds. Somewhere in those lights was Isaiah, living whatever life he'd built after she walked away. Maybe he was happy. Maybe he'd already moved on, found someone who appreciated grease-stained hands and patient explanations of how engines worked. Maybe he thought about her sometimes and felt nothing but relief. That possibility hurt worse than anger would have. Her phone buzzed. Text from the wedding planner. Final payment due for Metropolitan Club venue. $150,000. Friday deadline or we lose the booking. Natasha stared at the message until the screen went dark. In a restored brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, Catherine Ashford sat in her late husband's study, surrounded by bankers' boxes full of financial records. Her reading glasses reflected the glow from dual monitors showing spreadsheets and corporate filings and the digital skeleton of Donovan Graves's collapsing empire. Patricia from Covington and Burke had sent over the full analysis, 23 pages dense with numbers and legal citations and conclusions that all pointed to the same inevitable end. Donovan Graves had been running his fund like a Ponzi scheme, using new investor money to cover old debts, leveraging assets he didn't own to secure loans he couldn't repay. It was elegant in its stupidity, the kind of thing that worked until it didn't, and then it destroyed everyone in the blast radius. Natasha would be in that radius. Her company owed Donovan's fund $800,000 from a bridge loan 6 months ago. When his fund collapsed, and it would collapse, Catherine had made sure of that, Natasha's company would be dragged down with it. Catherine almost felt bad. Almost. But then she remembered watching Isaiah sign those divorce papers with steady hands while Natasha checked her watch. Remembered Donovan's smirk when he announced the engagement party. Remembered her son walking out of that conference room looking like someone had carved out his heart and handed it back to him in pieces. She didn't feel bad anymore. Her phone rang. Isaiah, done thinking about the IPO? I'm doing it. Spring timeline. Tell Westfield to file the SEC paperwork. Catherine leaned back in the leather chair that still smelled faintly of her husband's cologne even after 5 years. You sure once we announce there's no hiding anymore, every financial journalist in the country will write about you? Good. Let them write. Isaiah's voice carried something she hadn't heard in months. Not quite anger, but determination, maybe. Natasha wanted me to be more ambitious. She can read about my ambition in the Wall Street Journal. That's my boy. One more thing. The Metropolitan Club engagement party. I want to make sure Donovan knows I'm coming. How do you want to handle that? Send the RSVP. Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford plus guest. Make sure it goes to their wedding planner so Natasha sees it. Catherine smiled, sharp as cut glass. Consider it done. She hung up and pulled up the contact for Eleanor Wright, who ran the most exclusive event planning company in Manhattan. Eleanor had organized Catherine's husband's funeral, had coordinated charity galas for every major museum in the city, and owed Catherine enough favors to fill a book. The phone rang twice. Eleanor's voice was warm, professional, the kind of warmth that came with a six-figure retainer. Catherine, what can I do for you? I understand you're planning an engagement party at the Metropolitan Club. Natasha Sinclair and Donovan Graves. Brief pause. I am. I need you to add a name to the guest list. RSVP as accepted. Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford +1. Longer pause. The sound of typing. That name isn't on the approved list. It will be. Isaiah is an old family friend. I'd consider it a personal favor, Eleanor. More typing. Catherine could picture her scrolling through databases, cross-referencing names, putting pieces together the way good planners did when billionaires made requests. Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford. Any relation to Ashford Holdings? My son. The typing stopped. When Eleanor spoke again, her voice carried the careful neutrality of someone who'd just realized they were standing in a minefield. Of course. I'll add him immediately. Should I inform Miss Sinclair? Absolutely. Include it in her next update. I'm sure she'll be delighted to know Isaiah is attending. Of course. Will there be anything else? That's all. Thank you, Eleanor. Catherine ended the call and sent a text to Renata Kovac. Confirmed for Metropolitan Club, 3 weeks Saturday. I'll send details. Wear something that makes architects look like artists. Renata replied immediately. This is either going to be brilliant or a disaster. Catherine typed back, why not both? She closed the laptop and stood, joints protesting the 2 hours she'd spent immobile in the chair. The study was dark except for the desk lamp, the rest of the brownstone quiet and empty. Too quiet. She missed Henry most in moments like this, when she wanted to share the particular satisfaction of a plan coming together. But Henry was 5 years gone, and Isaiah needed a mother more than she needed a husband's ghost. Catherine turned off the lamp and climbed the stairs to bed, already planning what her son would wear when he walked into that engagement party and broke Natasha Sinclair's world in half. At Precision Auto Restoration, Isaiah stayed late finishing the Jaguar transmission. The work was meditative, hands moving through familiar patterns, removing the old synchros, inspecting the gear teeth for wear, replacing the worn parts with new ones that would mesh perfectly. Metal and precision and the satisfaction of making something broken whole again. His phone sat on the workbench, screen dark. No messages from Natasha. She'd tried twice more over the following days, then stopped. Good. He had nothing to say to her that wouldn't sound like bitterness or regret, and he was done with both. Tommy had gone home hours ago. The shop was silent except for the clank of tools and the occasional groan of metal settling. Isaiah liked it this way, just him and the machines, no pretending to be someone he wasn't. His phone finally buzzed. Text from his mother. RSVP confirmed. Wedding planner will notify Natasha tomorrow. Renata's in, suit fitting scheduled for Thursday. Isaiah set down the wrench he'd been holding, wiped his hands clean, stared at the message until the screen dimmed. This was it. The moment when he stopped hiding and started showing the world, showing Natasha, who he'd been all along. Part of him wanted to back out, maintain the comfortable invisibility he'd cultivated for 4 years. The other part, the part that had signed those divorce papers and walked away from $8,000 like it was pocket change, wanted to watch her face when she realized what she'd traded for Donovan Graves's empty promises. He typed back, "See you Thursday." Then he went back to the transmission, hands steady, heart quiet, building something that would work perfectly because that's what he did. He fixed things that were broken and made them better than before. Even if the thing he was fixing this time was his own pride. 2 days later, Natasha sat in her office, corner suite with a view, rented like everything else, staring at an email from Eleanor Wright Events. Updated guest list attached. Please review and confirm final headcount by Friday. She opened the attachment, scrolled through names she recognized. Fashion editors, investors, Donovan's business partners, the society photographers who would turn their engagement into content for magazines that wouldn't exist in 5 years. Then, 3 quarters down, Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford plus guest. RSVP accepted. Her coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattered against the desk. Hot liquid everywhere, spreading across the guest list printout, turning the names into brown-stained blurs. Carter Mercer Ashford. Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford. She grabbed her phone with shaking hands, pulled up Google, typed the name with coffee-sticky fingers. The results loaded. Her vision went white at the edges. Carter Technologies announces record Q4 growth. Subscription revenue exceeds projections. Isaiah Carter. Mercer Ashford named among top tech entrepreneurs under 40. Auto software startup Carter Technologies valued at $80 million in private markets. And photos. Isaiah in a suit she didn't recognize, shaking hands with the mayor. Isaiah at a ribbon cutting for some tech incubator in Brooklyn. Isaiah standing next to Catherine Ashford at a charity gala, both of them smiling. The caption reading, Catherine Ashford and son Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford support STEM education initiatives. Son. Her phone slipped from her hands, clattered against the desk. Isaiah wasn't just connected to Catherine Ashford. Isaiah was Catherine Ashford's son, the heir to Ashford Holdings. The mechanic she'd divorced for being too small, too content, too unwilling to chase more, was the founder of an $80 million company and the only child of one of the richest women in New York. And she'd thrown it away for Donovan Graves, who was worth less than nothing. The intercom on her desk buzzed, her assistant's voice tinny and uncertain. "Miss Sinclair, your 2 o'clock is here, the bankruptcy attorney." Natasha looked at the coffee spreading across her desk, at the Google results still glowing on her phone, at the guest list with Isaiah's name burning like a brand. "Cancel it." Her voice came out raw, scraped. "Cancel everything." She grabbed her coat and walked out, leaving the office behind, the coffee spreading like blood across everything she'd built and lost. The Metropolitan Club on Saturday night looked like old money having a fever dream. Crystal chandeliers hung from vaulted ceilings, each one worth more than most people earned in a year. White marble floors reflected candlelight from 200 tables arranged in perfect symmetry around a central dance floor. An orchestra played Vivaldi in the corner, strings weaving through conversation like thread through expensive fabric. Natasha Sinclair stood at the top of the grand staircase in a dress that cost $40,000. Rented like everything else in her life now, but nobody needed to know that. The fabric was ivory silk cut to skim her body like water, custom fitted to hide the weight she'd lost from stress, eating and not eating over the past 3 weeks. Her hair was swept up in an elaborate twist that had taken 2 hours and 3 stylists. Diamond earrings, also rented, caught the chandelier glow. She looked perfect, felt hollow. Below her, guests mingled with champagne flutes and practiced smiles. Fashion editors she'd courted for years, investors who'd funded her company when it was thriving. Society photographers positioned to capture every angle of what was supposed to be her triumph, marrying up, marrying money, marrying the kind of man who opened doors just by walking through them. Except Donovan Graves wasn't that man anymore. He stood at the bar, third scotch in 40 minutes, tie already loosened. The Brioni suit fit like a second skin, but he wore it like armor that had already failed. His phone kept buzzing. Creditors, lawyers, investors demanding answers he didn't have. He'd silenced it twice. On the third buzz, he threw it in a nearby plant. "You need to slow down." Natasha descended the stairs, careful on heels that pinched. "People are watching. Let them watch." He finished the scotch, slammed the glass on the bar hard enough that the bartender flinched. "Half these people are here to see me fail anyway. Nobody knows. Everyone knows." His laugh was sharp, ugly. "You think Catherine Ashford calling in my loans was quiet? Word's been out for a week. I'm toxic, Natasha, and anyone associated with me is toxic by proximity." She wanted to argue, couldn't. Her own investors had started pulling out 2 days ago, spooked by rumors about Donovan's fund. Her company's bank accounts were frozen, pending some investigation she didn't understand. The bankruptcy attorney she'd fired was probably right. She should have filed Chapter 11 months ago, taken the hit, started over clean. Instead, she'd bet everything on Donovan's promises. Now they were both sinking. "We can still salvage this." Her voice came out desperate, thin. "The party's paid for. The photographers are here. We smile, we celebrate, we show them we're fine. We're not fine." He grabbed another scotch from a passing waiter. "And I'm done pretending." Across the ballroom, near the entrance where late arrivals were still checking coats, Eleanor Wright stood with her tablet, monitoring the guest list. Professional smile, designer suit, the kind of calm that came from orchestrating 1,000 events without visible panic. But her eyes kept flicking to the door, waiting. At 8:15, a black town car pulled up to the curb. Not a limousine, nothing ostentatious. Just clean lines and tinted windows and the quiet confidence of people who didn't need to announce themselves. The driver opened the rear door. Catherine Ashford stepped out first. Navy gown, simple cut, pearl necklace that had belonged to her mother and her mother's mother before that. No diamonds except her wedding ring. Hair silver in the streetlight, face composed. She moved like money that had been money for so long it forgot to show off. Eleanor rushed to greet her. "Mrs. Ashford, we're honored. Where's the bride? Miss Sinclair is upstairs with Mr. Graves. Shall I?" "No need. I'll find her." Catherine swept past into the lobby, cane tapping against marble, guests parting without being asked. Behind her, a second figure emerged from the town car. Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford stood in the doorway wearing a charcoal suit that had been tailored to fit him perfectly but remained understated. White shirt open at the collar, no tie, no jewelry except a watch that had been his father's, stainless steel and simple. His hair was cut shorter than Natasha had ever seen it, revealing a face that looked both familiar and completely strange. He'd shaved, lost the perpetual shadow of stubble, stood straighter, or maybe just stopped slouching to make other people comfortable. Beside him stood Renata Kovac, tall, dark hair with that distinctive silver streak, sharp cheekbones that could have been carved from determination itself. Her dress was black with geometric cutouts that suggested blueprints, architecture-made fabric. She walked like someone who'd spent 30 years commanding construction sites and boardrooms and learned to own both. The announcer by the door, some college kid in a bow tie earning minimum wage, checked his list with shaking hands. Mr. Isaiah Carter Mercer Ashford, founder and CEO of Carter Technologies, and guest. The whisper started immediately, rolled through the crowd like wind through wheat. Carter Technologies, wasn't that the company going public in April? The software startup valued at $80 million? The one all the venture funds were trying to get into? Isaiah walked into the ballroom, not rushing, not hesitating, just walking like a man who'd decided to show up and didn't care what happened next. Renata kept pace beside him, her smile polite and utterly neutral. Guests moved aside without thinking about it, making space, recognizing hierarchy they couldn't articulate but felt in their bones. He stopped at Catherine's table, bent to kiss her cheek. "You're late. Traffic. In a town car with a driver?" I made him take the long way, needed time to think. He straightened, turned, and for the first time since entering made direct eye contact with Natasha. She'd forgotten his eyes, hazel, more brown than green, with flecks of gold that caught light. She'd looked at those eyes for 3 years, and somehow never seen the intelligence in them, the quiet calculation, the patience of someone who built things slowly and built them to last. "Hello, Natasha." Her mouth opened, closed. No sound came out. Donovan found his voice first, all false bravado and crumbling confidence. "Carter, didn't expect to see you here. I was invited." Isaiah pulled out the chair next to his mother, gestured for Renata to sit. "Seemed rude not to come." "Congratulations on your engagement, by the way. We're thrilled." Donovan's jaw was so tight the words barely escaped. "Though I'm surprised Ashford's son works with his hands. Thought you people hired mechanics instead of becoming them." The room went quiet, not silent. The orchestra still played, glasses still clinked, but quiet in the way that happens when people stop breathing to listen. "I am a mechanic." Isaiah accepted champagne from a waiter, still hadn't taken his eyes off Natasha. "Also a CEO. Turns out you can be both. Turns out being black doesn't mean I can't build empires while you're busy destroying yours." Gasps rippled through nearby tables. Donovan's face went purple. "You look nice." Isaiah's voice stayed conversational, like he'd just commented on the weather. "That dress new?" Natasha glanced down like she'd forgotten what she was wearing. It's vintage. From a rental house in Soho." "Thought so. Recognized the cut." He sipped the champagne. "My company's software handles inventory for that rental house. We built the tracking system that told you this dress was available." The implication hung there, crystalline and brutal. She was wearing borrowed clothes to celebrate an engagement to a bankrupt fraud, while the man she'd divorced for being too small had built the infrastructure that made her borrowed finery possible. Donovan's face went from purple to gray. "You smug son of a—" "Donovan." Natasha's hand on his arm, warning. But her eyes stayed on Isaiah. "You never told me about any of it. The company, the patents, your mother. Why?" Isaiah set down the champagne flute. The crystal rang against the table, clear and final. "Because I wanted you to love me for who I was, not what I had." His voice stayed level, conversational, but every word cut. 3 years, Natasha. 3 years I came home smelling like motor oil and you looked at me like I was something you stepped in. Asked me to sell my shop. Told your friends I was in automotive services because saying mechanic was embarrassing. I didn't mean... Yes, you did. Not angry, just certain. You meant every dismissive comment, every suggestion that I needed to be more ambitious, every time you introduced Donovan as your business partner while I was still your husband. You meant all of it." The ballroom had gone silent except for the rustle of fabric and the clink of glasses as 200 people pretended not to listen while listening to every word. Natasha's tears finally broke through, running black with mascara down her carefully painted face. "I was scared, terrified of ending up back in Columbus in some dead-end job, living paycheck to paycheck. I saw Donovan as security. He's broke." Catherine's voice cut through the confession like a scalpel. "Has been for months, using new investor money to cover old debts. The SEC opened an investigation 3 days ago." Donovan spun on her. "You're lying." "Am I?" She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, turned it to show him. Financial records, account statements, email chains with timestamps and damning subject lines. "My lawyers are very thorough." He grabbed for the phone. Security appeared from nowhere, 2 men in dark suits who'd been stationed around the ballroom wearing the kind of earpieces that meant they weren't waiters. Don't touch her. The larger guard stepped between Donovan and Catherine, casual but immovable. Step back, sir. Donovan stepped back, looked around the ballroom at 200 faces watching his public execution. Investors who'd lose millions, business partners who'd trusted him, photographers still taking pictures because this was the kind of disaster that sold magazines. His voice came out ragged, desperate. This is because I'm marrying your ex-wife. That's what this is. Revenge. Isaiah finally stood, moved around the table until he was face to face with Donovan, close enough to see the sweat on the other man's forehead, smell the scotch on his breath. This has nothing to do with Natasha. This is about you running your fund like a casino and losing other people's money. His voice dropped lower, intimate, meant only for Donovan but carrying to the surrounding tables. My software, the inventory management system, 3 auto shop chains your fund owns, all using it. Never licensed it, just stole the code and implemented it across 200 locations. We paid for that. You paid for a trial version, 60 days. You've been using it for 18 months. That's intellectual property theft, $15 million in damages conservatively. Isaiah stepped back. My lawyers filed this morning. You'll be served Monday. Donovan's world was ending. You could see it happening in real time. The blood draining, the slight sway, the way his hands started shaking as reality crushed him. He turned to Natasha, reaching for her like she was a life raft. This is your fault. If you just don't. Isaiah's voice went hard, the first real anger breaking through. Don't make this about her. You made every choice that brought you here. Take responsibility like a man instead of blaming someone else. Donovan's face twisted. He grabbed Natasha's wrist, yanked her close. We're leaving. Now. This engagement party is over. Let go of her. Or what? You'll sue me? Already doing that. He laughed, wild and bitter. You want her? Take her. She's broke anyway. Fashion company's dead, drowning in debt. Natasha jerked free, stumbling in her rented heels. When she spoke, her voice carried across the ballroom, loud enough that even the orchestra would have heard if they were playing. We're not leaving. You are. She wiped mascara from her face with the back of her hand, smearing it worse. This engagement is over. We're over. Get out. You can't be serious. I'm not marrying someone who uses me as a shield for his failures. Her voice cracked but held. I'm not desperate enough for that. Not anymore. Donovan stared at her, at Isaiah, at Catherine sitting calm and regal, watching his empire burn, at 200 guests witnessing the collapse of everything he'd built on lies and leverage. You're all going to regret this. He was shouting now, losing the last threads of composure. I have lawyers. I have connections. I'll bury every one of you. Security, please escort Mr. Graves out. Catherine didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. The 2 guards moved in, took Donovan's arms, not rough, but immovable. He fought for maybe 3 seconds before realizing how futile it was. This isn't over. He was still yelling as they walked him toward the exit. Natasha, you're making a mistake. Isaiah, you smug bastard, The door closed, cut off the rest. Silence flooded the ballroom like water filling a sinking ship. Natasha stood alone at the bar, mascara streaked, dress perfect, life in ruins. She looked at Isaiah the way drowning people look at shore, desperate, knowing it's too far to reach. Can we talk? Please, just 5 minutes. He should have said no. Should have walked away clean, let her collapse be her own problem, taken satisfaction in the justice of it. But something in her face, the absolute devastation, the recognition of how completely she'd destroyed herself, made him pause. 5 minutes. Catherine raised an eyebrow. He gave her a look that said, I know what I'm doing, even though he absolutely didn't. They walked to the edge of the ballroom near the windows overlooking Fifth Avenue. Central Park sprawled dark beyond the glass, a pocket of nothing in the middle of everything. Natasha spoke first, voice barely above a whisper. I'm sorry. For all of it. For treating you like you weren't enough. For Donovan. For being so terrified of poverty that I married wealth instead of character. I know. That's it? Just I know? Isaiah looked out at the park, at the darkness where the city pretended nature still existed. What do you want me to say, Natasha? That I forgive you? I do. That I understand? I do. That any of it changes what happened? It doesn't. I threw away something real because I was chasing something fake. She was crying again, quiet tears that dripped off her chin. I looked at you for 3 years and only saw grease under your fingernail. I never saw the code you wrote, the business you built, the man you were becoming. I saw what scared me instead of what could save me. The words hung between them, true and too late. You weren't looking for salvation, Natasha. You were looking for security, and I couldn't give you that because you wouldn't let me. Isaiah turned to face her. Every time I tried to talk about the future, you changed the subject. Every time I suggested we were enough, you wanted more, not more for us. More to prove to everyone else that you'd made it out of Columbus, I know. Then you know why we can't go back. Even if Donovan wasn't in the picture, and he's not anymore, even if your company wasn't failing, we'd still be right here because you need someone who matches your ambition. And I need someone who sees me without needing me to be more than I am. She nodded, defeated. What happens now? To me? That's up to you. He pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card. This is my corporate attorney, John Westfield. He specializes in bankruptcy restructuring. If you file Chapter 11 this week, you might salvage something from your company. Start over clean. She took the card with trembling hands. Why would you help me? Because spite is easy. Dignity is hard. He stepped back, ready to return to his mother's table. And because you were right about one thing. I am ambitious, just not in the way you wanted. Isaiah walked away, didn't look back. Behind him, Natasha stood alone near the windows, holding a business card and watching her reflection in glass that showed her everything she'd lost. At Catherine's table, Renata was explaining something about sustainable architecture to 2 investors who'd wandered over, drawn by proximity to power. She caught Isaiah's eye, raised her champagne glass slightly, acknowledgement without judgment. He sat, accepted a fresh glass from a waiter, tried to ignore the weight of 200 stares. That was merciful, Catherine murmured. Too merciful, maybe. She's already destroyed. Kicking her would just make me cruel. Your father would have kicked. Dad held grudges like investments. I'd rather build something new than maintain something bitter. He sipped champagne that tasted like expensive regret. Can we leave? I've made my point. Soon. Let them see you staying. Let them see you're not the one running. So they stayed, made conversation with approaching guests who suddenly remembered they'd always been friendly with the Ashfords. Smiled for photographers who wanted shots of Catherine and her previously invisible son. Pretended this was normal, sitting in a ballroom at someone else's engagement party after destroying the groom's business and ending the engagement in under 30 minutes. Natasha left first, slipped out a side door without saying goodbye to anyone, still wearing the $40,000 dress because the rental agreement wasn't up until tomorrow. The guests dispersed slowly after that. Without a bride or groom, the party had no center, no purpose. By 10 o'clock, the ballroom was empty except for staff clearing champagne flutes and wilted flowers. Isaiah rode home in the town car with his mother and Renata, watching Manhattan slide past the tinted windows. Buildings lit up like circuit boards, people moving through their Saturday nights with no idea that 3 blocks away someone's life had just imploded. You did well tonight. Catherine's voice was softer now. No audience to perform for. Controlled, measured. You let her save face even when you didn't have to. Didn't feel like I won. Because revenge isn't winning. It's just settling a debt. She patted his knee, the gesture brief but warm. Tomorrow you'll feel better. Next week, better still. 6 months from now, you'll barely remember tonight. She was right and wrong. He'd remember. But the memory would lose its teeth, become just another story about a marriage that didn't work, and an engagement party that ended in ruins. The weeks after were quiet. Natasha filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, sold her company's assets to pay creditors, moved back to Columbus. Isaiah heard through his mother's network that she'd taken a consulting job with a small fashion boutique, helping them expand. Making $40,000 a year, living in a modest apartment, starting over. Donovan's fund collapsed spectacularly. The SEC investigation uncovered enough fraud to fill 3 lawsuits. He settled out of court, gave up his licenses, agreed to never work in finance again. Last Isaiah heard, he was selling insurance in Connecticut. Carter Technologies went public in April. The IPO raised $70 million. Isaiah kept 60% of shares, his mother 20%, sold 20% to institutional investors who promised not to pressure him about quarterly earnings. His face appeared in Forbes, Fortune, the Wall Street Journal. People wanted interviews about the mechanic who became a CEO. He declined all of them. Instead, he spent his days split between the Queen's shop and corporate offices in Midtown, building engines and algorithms with the same patient precision. The IPO money went into expansion. New markets, better software, hiring developers who understood that code was just another kind of engine that needed regular maintenance. 6 months after the engagement party, a package arrived at Isaiah's apartment in Brooklyn Heights. No return address, Columbus postmark. Inside, a cashier's check for $8,000. The exact amount Natasha had offered him at the divorce. The note was written on plain paper, no letterhead, just her handwriting he'd recognize anywhere. Isaiah, this is the severance I tried to give you. I'm returning it because I finally understand. You never wanted my money. You wanted my respect. I threw away a good man because he didn't come in the package I expected. That failure is mine to carry. I don't expect forgiveness. Just wanted you to know you were right about everything. I hope you're building things that matter. Isaiah sat in his apartment, modest 2-bedroom in Brooklyn Heights. Furniture he'd built himself, walls lined with bookshelves holding mechanical engineering texts and coding manuals. Reading the note twice, then he called his mother. Remember the second chance fund you wanted to start? For kids from small towns who want to learn trades, I remember. Catherine's voice carried the smile he couldn't see. You have seed money? $8,000 from Ohio. He folded the check, tucked it in his wallet. Let's build something. 2 weeks later, the Carter Ashford Heritage Center opened in a converted warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. Part auto shop, part computer lab, part classroom. Funded by the returned severance payment and matched by Catherine's foundation. The program was simple. Teach underprivileged teenagers mechanics and coding. Show them that working with your hands wasn't inferior to working with spreadsheets. That building engines and building software required the same skills. Patience, precision, problem solving. Isaiah taught 3 afternoons a week, walked kids through rebuilding transmissions and debugging Python scripts, explaining how metal and code followed the same fundamental rules. On a Thursday in October, he was helping a 16-year-old named Terrell diagnose a misfiring cylinder when Catherine arrived. She was walking steadier than she had in months, leaning on her cane but not relying on it. Package came to the foundation office, forwarded from Ohio. She handed him a small box. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, a framed photograph, Isaiah and Natasha on their wedding day at City Hall. Both of them smiling, genuinely happy, young enough to believe everything would work out. No note this time, just the photo. Isaiah looked at it for a long moment, saw himself at 28, grease still under his fingernails even in a suit, grinning like he'd won the lottery. Saw Natasha at 30, sundress she'd designed herself, eyes bright with hope. That version of them didn't exist anymore. Maybe never had. He set the frame on a shelf in his office. Not hidden, not displayed. Just there. Terrell wiped oil from his hands, came over to look. That's your ex-wife? The one from the party? How'd you hear about that? Google, man. You're kind of famous now. The kid grinned. She's pretty. Why'd you divorce? Isaiah thought about all the true answers. Because she wanted more than I could be. Because I needed someone who saw me without needing me to be different. Because marriage built on assumptions instead of honesty crumbles when you finally tell the truth. Instead, he said, because we wanted different things, and sometimes that's nobody's fault. You think you'll get married again? Maybe, if I find someone who likes grease stains. Terrell laughed, went back to the engine. Isaiah watched him work, methodical, careful, learning the rhythm of how machines breathed, and felt something settle in his chest that might have been peace. His phone buzzed. Text from Renata Kovac. Coffee tomorrow? Have a project that needs someone who understands structural integrity. Both kinds. He typed back, 7 a.m. Sure, she replied. Perfect. Bring blueprints for that nonprofit expansion you're planning. Isaiah pocketed the phone, turned back to Terrell and the misfiring engine, showed him how to read spark plug fouling, how to diagnose whether the problem was fuel or air or timing. Outside the windows, Brooklyn sprawled gray and industrial and beautiful in its honesty. No pretending, no performance, just the work of building and fixing and making things better than you found them. Catherine watched from the doorway. When Isaiah glanced up, she raised her coffee cup slightly, a toast to endings that felt like beginnings. He raised his own cup back, smiled, returned to teaching a kid from Brownsville how to rebuild what was broken and make it run clean.